Chapter 8. That afternoon was full of back-breaking work. James and I unloaded 25 heavy bags of feed from the truck and lined them up in the feed room. Then, instead of finishing the vegetable garden, James had me help him move 60 bales of hay from the hay barn to the horse barn, and another 20 bales went to the cow barn. When I went to feed Nicker that evening, I was so tired that he almost managed to knock me over. That evening I helped James prepare dinner. It was the first time I had ever actually helped to cook a real meal. I had used a microwave plenty of times, but Mr. Hassler didn't even own one. I didn't know I was supposed to add extra flour because of the altitude, so the muffins were flat. Also, I let the beans cook a little too long, so they were a little mushy, but neither Mr. H. nor James seemed in the mood to complain. "You've done a nice job with the foal, Sean," James said around a mouthful of potatoes. "We might want to see how Amanda takes him tomorrow." I choked on my beans. "His mama? But you told me she doesn't want him." "Well, she didn't, it's true. But it might be that now she's had time, she may have changed her mind." "Yeah, but she may not have. Why take the chance? Nicker might get hurt. Or he might get to have a mama who loves him. We don't know. She accepted one of the foals she rejected at birth, but the others had to be removed permanently. The only way we can find out is by trying." "But if he's doing well without her, why mess with it?" I turned to Mr. H. "I don't mind being his mama, and he's already accepted me." Mr. H. didn't say anything. "He doesn't need his mama," I said desperately. "Isn't that a decision that he and his mama should make?" Mr. H. said softly. I attacked my hamburger, slicing it with my knife. "I'd rather he miss his mama than be hurt by her," I muttered. "What?" James asked. "Nothing." The only sound for the next few minutes was the scraping of silverware against the plates. I didn't want to think about Nicker's mother. I needed something else to think about. "So are you going to tell me about the time you went above and beyond the call of duty?" I asked finally. James tried to cover up a chuckle with a cough. They exchanged looks, and Mr. H. sighed heavily. "I hope you haven't been looking forward to a spectacular story all day, Sean. It isn't as impressive as Mrs. Walker tried to make it sound." James raised his eyebrows and shook his head. "I don't care how impressive it is," I said slowly. "I just think I deserve to hear this story." "Oh, really?" he countered. "And what have you done to deserve this story?" "I've been working harder than I ever have," I said truthfully. He smiled at me. "And I hope that's a trend that's going to continue." I nodded, trying to look as serious and committed as I could. I was getting pretty curious about this story. "I guess some people say I went above and beyond the call of duty one day in May of '44. "But you don't consider it going beyond the call of duty?" "Not really." "Why don't you just tell the story and let Sean judge for himself?" James suggested. Mr. H. fiddled with his pipe for so long I thought he would never answer the question. Just as I was about to say something, he finally began. "Well, it was May, but in Germany, in '44, you couldn't tell it was springtime. Spring to me means life. Germany in '44 was full of anything but life. Death was all around us. We had been engaged in a battle with a German battalion for 12 hours when we got the orders to pull out, so the captain had to start heading back to France. Two of my men who were involved in one of our last offensive moves decided to stay behind and draw Nazi fire while the rest of us hightailed it out of there. One of them got hit, and the other was stuck in the crossfire. I helped them get out of the line of fire." "And you don't consider that going above and beyond the call of duty?" I asked. "Not when they're trying to help the whole squad. They didn't have to help us. They could have turned tail and run with the rest of us, and we would have all taken equal risks getting out of there. But they knew that if somebody was willing to take a big chance, the rest of us would only have to take a small chance." He looked down at his plate and his voice dropped. "They didn't deserve to die there. They deserved to get home and see their wives and children. I wanted them to make it home. They were my bunkmates, my buddies." He looked at me. "They needed help. I helped them. That's not going above and beyond the call of duty. That's merely being human." I looked at him, and then I looked at James. James had lowered his head during his speech and was shaking his head back and forth slowly. I looked back at Mr. H., who was regarding me silently. "Mr. Hassler," I began. "Dave," he corrected. "Dave, you stayed back to help the men who were supposed to create a diversion to let you get out safely, right?" Yes. Then you definitely went above and beyond the call of duty, because according to your captain, your only duty was to get your butt safely out of there. Mr. H looked at me for a long time. Come on, James, let's get these dishes done, he said, finally pushing his chair back. Oh, hey, Mr. H, have a seat. I can help tonight, I said quickly. I'd rather help James with the dishes and have you get started on your 2 tasks for the evening. What 2 tasks? You need to try to call your mom again, and then you need to start working on your homework. I'm sure you've got other homework in addition to your English paper, but I'd like to see you at least get through the rough draft tonight. He said it like a request, but I recognized it for what it was. Yes, sir, I said, getting up to call my mom. While the phone was ringing, I wandered over to the medals that were in the glass frame. There were lots of them. I had no idea what most of them meant, and absolutely no concept of what rank he had achieved. But I was curious, especially after the story. I recognized the Purple Heart. I had just decided to ask Mr. H about that when my mother answered the phone. Hello? Her voice was low and husky. I was taken off guard. I hadn't expected her to answer, so I hadn't planned what I was going to say. Mom? Sean? Yeah, it's me. What the hell do you want? Her voice wasn't low and husky anymore. I just wanted to, tell you, where I was last night, I stuttered. Okay, so where were you? I knew from her tone that she hadn't even known I wasn't home last night, or the night before for that matter. I shouldn't have been surprised at all. I was at Dave's. I would have left it at that, except I knew Dave needed me to get permission. And I'm going to stay here for the weekend. Is that all you called for? You're tying up my time to tell me where you're going to be this weekend? She didn't even know enough to realize that Dave wasn't one of my regular buddies. Sorry, I said shortly. I forgot how much you cared. What I care about is that you've been working for the last week and still trying to freeload. For your information, buddy, the phone and lights cost money. If you plan on coming back here, you better plan on using at least part of your paycheck on your bills, if not all of it. Most of our bills are high because of you. I slammed down the phone. It took a lot of effort not to throw the phone through the window. I went upstairs for a while. I'd rather Mr. H think I was actually doing what he had told me to do than have him think I was being a baby. It took me a good half hour to calm down. To try to get my mind off things, I looked over the notes Mrs. Walker had given me. The desk in the room had a lamp, a cup full of pens and pencils, and a packet of notebook paper on it. The items set out neatly, looked like they came out of a set for a movie about a college prep school. I sat down and pulled out a pencil. I started doodling, and eventually my doodling became a list of words. The list of words became a list of ideas. I had a full page when Mr. Hassler stuck his head in my door. Sean, it's 10 o'clock. Time for lights out. I didn't look up from my paper. I just nodded. Did you get a hold of your mom? I nodded again. Did she agree to you staying here? Another nod. How's the paper going? I shrugged. I could feel his presence in the doorway. I wanted to tell him to go away. I didn't think I could talk to him right now. Not without losing it. I didn't want to lose it in front of him. Are you really going to make Nicker go back to his mama? I demanded suddenly. I hadn't even known I was going to ask. I didn't look up, but I heard Mr. H come into the room and sit down on the bed. Sean, sometimes we need to be able to give people a second chance. Animals are no different. I didn't say anything. You know, he said gently, it would be good for Nicker if Amanda took him back. You know, I retorted, it will hurt him really bad when she doesn't. What makes you so sure she won't take him back? He didn't say it smart-like. He said it like he was really interested in my opinion. I looked at him. Because they never do. As much as I tried, I couldn't stop the tears that started to slide down my cheeks. Once a mother hurts her child, she keeps doing it because it's easy and it makes her feel strong. I didn't mean to keep talking, but I couldn't shut up. She doesn't care about him. She didn't before and she won't now. Don't make me go back. Please. Please don't. You can't make him go back. Mr. H crossed over to me, pulled me up into a rough hug, and I still couldn't stop. Don't make him go back. Don't send him back to her. Please. She makes him hurt. Don't make me go back. Mr. Hassler never said anything. He just held me. And when my tears finally stopped, he still didn't say anything. He just patted me on the back and said, "I'll see you tomorrow," and went down the hall to his room. Breakfast the next morning was quiet. I didn't know what to say to Mr. H. After I had crawled into bed, I had cried myself to sleep. I hadn't broken down and cried like that since the last time my dad dropped me off at my mom's house. I wasn't able to stop myself from crying either time. James came in as soon as we were washing up the dishes. "Morning, boss, Sean," he said, nodding to each of us. "Morning," we replied at the same time. Mr. H sounded only a little more lively than I did. "What's the schedule for today, boss?" James asked, sitting down. "Well, I think Sean ought to finish the vegetable garden today. You can take care of the feeding, and then I thought maybe we ought to move the cattle from the far pasture into the east pasture because the weatherman seems to think we've got a storm front coming in for the weekend." "Fine with me," said James. "And then," Mr. H continued, "I thought you and Sean could start sorting and piling pumpkins for the elementary schools." "Good enough," James said, standing up. "But when are we going to try and nicker with Manda again?" Mr. H looked at me. "I've decided that we're not going to." "Okay, then," said James after a moment's hesitation. "You're the one who knows what you're doing." "Why are we sorting pumpkins?" I asked to cover my confusion. "We donate pumpkins to schools each year." "Yeah," James said, "and that's why you're here." "Huh?" "This ranch qualifies to receive community service because we make so many donations to the community. Pumpkins for Halloween, trees for Christmas, and then we run a youth summer camp for underprivileged children. So that's why we get you." "Oh," I said, and went back to washing dishes. Fertilizing the garden wasn't so bad that morning. It was getting colder out, so the stuff didn't stink nearly as much. I was really glad I took the jacket Mr. Hasser gave me. I didn't want to let Nicker out into the paddock after feeding him because I thought it was too cold, but James said it would be good for him. Every once in a while, as I was spreading the fertilizer, I'd catch a glimpse of him romping between the barns. It seems James was right. Sorting pumpkins was tough, but it wasn't nearly as hard as stacking the grain and hay had been yesterday. "So what did you think of Boss's story yesterday?" James asked. I shrugged. "It was pretty cool, I guess." "It's too bad he didn't tell you all of it. If he had, you might think it's more than pretty cool." "Oh, then why don't you tell me the rest of the story?" "Why? It wouldn't matter to you that he went against direct orders to go save his buddies." "What do you mean, against direct orders?" "He knew the men were in trouble, and so did his captain, but his captain had forbidden him to go back for them." "Go back for them? I thought they were all together." James shook his head. "No, the rest of the squad had already moved on, leaving those two to die or be taken prisoner." "Why did the captain order Mr. H not to go back? It doesn't make any sense." "The captain didn't want more of his men going back behind enemy lines." "They were behind enemy lines?" He nodded. "But Boss figured he didn't have anything to lose by going back for his buddies." "Nothing to lose? What about his life?" "Well, he was already wounded, so—" "What?" This time my voice squeaked. "Have you looked in the case with all of his badges and medals?" "Yeah." "Did you see the piece of shrapnel?" "Yeah." "They took that out of his arm when he carried the other wounded men back to the hospital." I sat down in a daze. "I don't consider it above and beyond the call of duty," I could hear Mr. H saying. "I consider it merely being human." My God, not only had he saved two men, he had been injured at the time. In order to perform the rescue, he had been forced to go back behind enemy lines and find the wounded men. James was grinning at me. "Kind of puts a different light on it, huh?" "Kind of," I agreed weakly. "Come on," he said, slapping me on the back. "Let's get these pumpkins sorted." "Hey," I said suddenly, "that reminds me." "What?" "What about the bullet that's in the case?" "What about it?" "Why is it in there? There's got to be a story that goes with that, too." "Why don't you ask the boss?" James replied with a grin. "I was going to, but I kind of have a feeling that you have a different story than the one I'll get from him." "You catch on pretty quickly, Sean, but you'll need to ask him first. If he leaves details out again, I'll fill you in later." "Good deal." The more time I spent with James, the more okay he seemed. At first I thought he was a jerk, just patronizing a kid. The more I got to know him, though, the more I realized I was the one who had been coming across as a jerk. "Hey, James." "Yeah?" "How many community service kids do you get here?" He shrugged. "It changes from year to year. Sometimes we don't have anybody for weeks on end. Sometimes we have to turn away kids who would be good working here." What do you mean, turn them away? I thought the judge just assigned people here. He stopped sorting pumpkins and looked at me like he was trying to decide whether or not to say something. Isn't that right? Can't the judge just assign people here? I repeated. Yes and no, James answered. Boss gets to have some say in the kids we get. He'll only take them if he thinks maybe he can help them. The judge usually knows what kind of kids would work well here. A boss doesn't want any more than one here at a time. He wants to be able to give you his full attention. Lucky me, I mumbled. Yeah, you're lucky, James said very seriously. Give it a chance, Sean. Give Boss a chance. He wants to help you. What if I don't think I need any help? James shrugged and went back to sorting pumpkins. Yeah, I was definitely the one coming across as a jerk. I took my time with Nicker that evening. I was trying to sort out how I felt about Mr. H. At first, he had just seemed like an old fart who used the free labor of community service kids that his old fart judge friend passed over to him. Then, after I'd spent a couple days here, I thought that maybe he was trying to help me because he wanted to. Now I wasn't so sure. Now it seemed like something he just did as part of his job, not necessarily because he cared. He always tried to help the community service kids. Our relationship didn't seem so special anymore. I mean, I thought that maybe he and I could get along, that maybe he would be willing to help me out. Now it didn't seem like any big deal. I was just what he did. I was just another community service kid to him. Nicker butted me. Yeah, I know, I said, tugging playfully on his ears. You and I are real buddies. You weren't planned. I got you. I hugged him. No one else did. And no one else was going to take him away from me.